Whoa, Todd, woo! I don't speak pineapple, woo!
This team's looking to rebound after an absolutely humiliating beatdown in their final game of the 2018 season. What's the best case and worst case scenario regular season record in 2019 for the Alabama Crimson Tide? Let's find out. Hey, good morning, it's Uncle Lou here. Yeah, that's right, it's me, Uncle Lou, and I'm live for you on LouTube today. So thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Also, in addition to all that, as well, you know the routine. Welcome to the first ever Uncle Lou best case, worst case, way too early predictions for the 2019 college football season. This is going to be a new series of videos I do for this season. I've never done this before. I do the in-depth preview and prediction videos every summer where I go through 50 or 60 teams. I go game by game through the schedule, tell you an exact win-loss record, or prediction anyway, exact win-loss record for 50 or 60 teams. That doesn't happen till the summer. We're going to do an entire series of videos now, though, best case, worst case. We're going to look at a series of teams and we're going to try to figure out, okay, what's the best case scenario here in terms of a regular season record? And if the wheels fall off, what's the worst case scenario in terms of regular season record? And up first is the Alabama Crimson Tide. All right, now we're going to do a whole bunch of these videos, an entire series, so we'll cover a bunch of teams. I'm going to go in order, though, from over on the Patreon page. I made a post on the Uncle Lou Patreon page a couple of weeks ago letting everyone know I was going to be doing these videos, and I said, let me know which teams you want to see, and those are the teams I'm gonna do. Up first, like I mentioned, Alabama Crimson Tide. This comes as a suggestion from Patreon member Melon Matt. Good morning, sir. Really appreciate you supporting the channel, and I hope you enjoy today's video. If there's a team you want to see me do in this best case, worst case scenario, head on over to the Patreon page, get yourself signed up. There's a link in the description of this video, says support the channel. That link will take you over to the Uncle Lou Patreon page and get yourself signed up. Let me know which team you want to see in this best case, worst case series that we're doing. All right, here we go. Alabama Crimson Tide. Like I mentioned in the beginning, didn't end last season the way Alabama fans wanted it to end. Undefeated during the regular season, beat Georgia in the SEC title game, convincing win over Oklahoma in the first round of the playoffs, but then absolutely embarrassed in the national title game against Clemson, losing that game 44-16. I'm sure you all remember that. 4th and 6, bro.
Whoa, Todd, woo!
Yeah, I doubt we'll be seeing that play again from a Nick Saban coached Alabama team. But anyway, hard to knock a team who goes 14-1 and loses in the national title game. I get that, but Alabama is a national title or bust type of program right now, and really deservedly so. In my opinion, and I say this all the time, I think Alabama and Clemson are the only two teams who really deserve to have the attitude of national title or bust. Now, there's a list of 5, 6, 7, 8, whatever, 9, 10, maybe other teams that can realistically have aspirations to win a national title heading into 2019. But if you look at the state of college football over the last 5, 10 years, whatever, right now anyway, I think Alabama and Clemson are the only two teams that should have a national title or bust mentality. So Alabama's season did end on a disappointing note with that loss. They'll look to rebound in 2019. Can they do it? I don't know. We'll see as the season goes along. What we're going to do today, though, is we're going to take a look at Alabama's schedule for 2019. We're going to try to find some landmines, games that might trip them up. Are there any difficult away games? What does their non-con schedule look like? And we're going to come up with a best case scenario and a worst case scenario in terms of their regular season record. All right, here's their schedule. Trusty notes time. Yeah, just like from the preview and prediction videos. Copious notes here. I've been studying this for hours and hours so that I make sure I give you guys accurate and reliable information. But let's run through the schedule real quick here. Okay, week 1, they open up with a non-con Power 5 team neutral site game in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium against Duke. Week 2 at home, New Mexico State. Week 3 on the road at South Carolina. Week 4 at home, Southern Miss. Week 5 at home, Ole Miss. That heads into their first bye week. Then they come out on the road at Texas A&M, home against Tennessee, home against Arkansas, and then their second bye week. All teams have 2 bye weeks this season. If you didn't know, you'll notice that when you start looking at the schedules for next year. Every single team has 2 bye weeks this year. This isn't a change or anything that's been made in NCAA football. You won't see 2 bye weeks every single year going forward. It's just the way the calendar falls this year requires the 2 bye weeks. So second bye week comes after a home game against Arkansas. Then you got the big home game against LSU, on the road at Mississippi State, final non-con game of the year at home against Western Carolina, and then of course Alabama finishes up their regular season like they do every year in the Iron Bowl, this year on the road at the Barn. All right, what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try to be sort of consistent with all these teams that I do for this best case, worst case scenario, but I'm going to sort of break the schedule into 4 sort of categories: non-conference games, away games, are there any trap games, and I'm going to look for the toughest 3-game stretch on every team's schedule. You see this a lot in college football. A team could have a tough 3-game stretch where the team, Alabama in this case, could be better than all 3 of those teams in that stretch, but because you have to play those 3 teams in a row, sometimes you see teams slip up. So we're going to look for toughest 3-game stretches on every schedule, starting with this one: away games, non-con games, and are there any trap games. Let's start with Alabama's non-conference schedule. The only Power 5 team on the non-conference schedule, Duke. Obviously, this game looks like a mismatch on paper. Duke, an okay team in the ACC, but the ACC really is just a terrible conference right now. It's Clemson, and then there really aren't any other even really good teams in the ACC, at least in 2018. There are a couple of teams looking to rebound and have better seasons in 2019, and I'm sure we'll get to some of those teams on down the road. But Duke, I mean, this game should be a mismatch. Duke had a great quarterback last year. He's gone for the NFL. So, you know, we'll see. And then New Mexico State, Southern Miss, and Western Carolina, these are just utter mismatches. Hard to imagine Alabama having any trouble or running into any problems with any of these 4 non-conference games. Away games. Now, these can be tricky, especially in the SEC, right? Some of these SEC home crowds, some of these SEC stadiums are some of the toughest places to play in all of college football. So you take a look at Alabama's road schedule this year: at South Carolina, at Texas A&M, at Mississippi State, at Auburn. South Carolina. South Carolina did beat Alabama the last time they played, right? Was that back in 2011, though, I think. Hard to imagine South Carolina pulling off the upset here. It is tough to play at South Carolina, but I'm not very high on South Carolina heading into 2019. We'll see. At Texas A&M. Now, I think most people are going to point to this as probably the toughest game on Alabama's schedule this year. I know LSU is always a big game. Auburn is always a big game. I'm high on Texas A&M, higher than most people are. I put them in the top 10 of my way too early post-signing day top 10 poll. I think this is probably their most difficult game. It's on the road at Kyle Field, home of the 11th man, 12th man, whatever it is. In my opinion, that's the toughest game on the schedule at Texas A&M. At Mississippi State, they seem to take a step back last year. Hard to imagine them not taking another step back this year. And then the Iron Bowl at the end. Now, we've seen a lot of weird things happen in the Iron Bowl. Some of these, these big rivalry games, you see weird things happen. So obviously, this is a game that technically could go either way, but you have to imagine at this point, Alabama would be a pretty big favorite there. Now, trap games. Are there any trap games on this schedule? Now, to me, a trap game is a game against a team that everyone expects you to win, but for one reason or another, that team may sneak up on you and beat you, right? Not really any obvious trap game that jumps out to me. You get a bye before Texas A&M and you get a bye before LSU. Probably your 2 most difficult games of the season, and you have a bye week heading into both of those. If you played somebody before Texas A&M, maybe that would be a potential trap game. If you played somebody before LSU, maybe that's a potential trap game, but you have bye weeks there. I'm going to go with the Tennessee game as a potential trap game here. Tennessee, of course, struggled for a long time, hadn't beat Alabama in forever. Jeremy Pruitt's second year. It is at home for Alabama, but you play them the week after you play Texas A&M, which I think is going to be a huge, huge game. It wouldn't surprise me at all if Alabama and Texas A&M were both undefeated heading into that game. Going to be a lot of eyeballs, a lot of people watching that game, talking about that game, and then you have to turn around the very next week and play probably your second biggest rival at home, Tennessee, a team that everyone is going to expect you to just sort of roll over. So while I'm in no way predicting right now that Tennessee will beat Alabama, that really, to me, looks like the only game on the schedule that stands out as a potential trap game. Toughest three-game stretch. There aren't any. There is not a tough three-game stretch on this schedule, and I'll just go through every three-game stretch. Duke, New Mexico State, South Carolina. No. New Mexico State, South Carolina, Southern Miss. No. South Carolina, Southern Miss, Ole Miss. No. Southern Miss, Ole Miss, Texas A&M. No. Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Tennessee. Maybe, but you get a bye week in there. I mean, if I had to pick a three-game stretch, Ole Miss at Texas A&M and then Tennessee, but you have a bye week. And then the second most difficult three-game stretch would be Arkansas, LSU, and at Mississippi State, but you also have a bye week there. So not really any difficult three-game stretches that really jump out when you look at this schedule. Alabama's offense is going to be absolutely loaded again next year. Of course, Tua Tagovailoa is back, softest player in all of college football, but he'll light it up against a lot of these inferior teams without question. Now, if Texas A&M, LSU, or Auburn is able to put an elite defense on the field, then yeah, they can shut him down. But short of that, he's going to light it up for 3 quarters every game like he did last year. He can't finish a game. He can't play all 4 quarters. We know that. We've seen that. It's yet to happen. But he's absolutely lights out for 3 quarters against inferior teams, and there's plenty of those on that schedule. All those NFL wide receivers return. They do lose tight end Irv Smith. Not sure if they can replace him. But, I mean, Alabama's not hurting for talent. It's not like this is the first time Alabama's ever lost talented players to the NFL. They have the #1 recruiting class in something like 9 out of the last 10 years, so they're loaded with talent. Defensively, I actually think Alabama's defense may be a little bit better this year than it was last year. I think their defense took a step back last year. They were young, especially in the secondary. You get a lot of those guys back. Biggest loss, Quentin Williams. You're not replacing that guy on the defensive front. But again, you've recruited at an astronomical level over the last 3 or 4 years. So you're loaded with talented future NFL defensive linemen. So it's not like you're hurting there. But I question whether or not you have anybody that can step in and be as good as Quentin Williams was. Obviously, to me, I think that was your biggest loss on defense last year. But you're going to be loaded. You still have Nick Saban, so you'll be the best coached team in all of college football. Best case scenario, obviously, for Alabama regular season is going to be 12-0, right? We saw them do it last year. I don't think anyone would be surprised if they finished the regular season 12-0 this year. Worst case, absolute worst case scenario, if you're an Alabama fan, I think you have to count the Texas A&M game at least as a potential loss. I think you have to count the LSU game at least as a potential loss. Not saying that I expect you to lose either of those. I'm just saying this is a best case, worst case thing. So best case, 12-0. I'm going to say worst case scenario, absolute worst case scenario, I think would be 9-3. If for some reason Tua were to go down and you have to play an inexperienced backup and you trip up against Texas A&M and LSU, and then maybe one of these other teams catches you napping, especially if you have some injuries. I doubt it would be South Carolina, maybe Tennessee, maybe Mississippi State, maybe Ole Miss, something like that. So I'm going to go best case scenario for Alabama in 2019 regular season, 12-0. Absolute worst case scenario, 9-3. And listen, before you cry in the comments about 9-3, 9-3 for an absolute worst case scenario is pretty good, okay? Tennessee fan would give their left nut to go 9-3. Have a good morning.
All right.